I don't think anything can be salvaged from this.
So I received this letter in the post. It's from Polaris and is an important stop ride notice. And what it says is to stop riding your ATV if it's a 2021 to 2023 Sportsman 450 and 570 models. So if you know anyone with any of these, you might want to make sure that they're aware of this issue. Or even other models, frankly, as I will get into in just a moment. So this is a quick explanation of what happened to my 2021 850 model.
Right, so I was riding this quad, noticed flames, just started like coming through the steering column and where the dash is. Tried to put it out quickly with some snow, turned it off, just was getting worse and worse, couldn't stop it. Went back home, grabbed my phone, grabbed my wife's quad, drove back here to see how it was doing, and here we go. We just got a raging inferno.
And this is the aftermath after the fire. It was hot enough to melt the engine, melt the bottom of the wheels. I felt the trees at the time and they were pretty hot. I mean, these things burn hot. It's no joke when they do catch on fire. The other thing I would mention is that if you're unfortunate enough for this or something like this to happen, is to be particularly cautious when dealing with Polaris themselves. It seems they have a lot riding on what are determined to be the causes of these fires. For instance, according to the US Consumer Product Safety Commission, Polaris has agreed to pay $27.25 million in civil penalties for failure to report defective and recreational off-road vehicles. Which leads me to my experience with dealing with Polaris after I reported the fire. A few days later, Polaris sent a technology investigator to come and examine the cause of the fire. The guy took many photos, inspected the vehicle, and I helped assist. So a few days later, I hear from a representative of Polaris, and she told me that the findings from the investigative team were that the fire was probably caused by organic matter on the fuel rail. So I took to Google and I looked up this fuel rail and its location. It's towards the back left side of the ATV. So I told her the fire originated at the front of the ATV, approximately where the power steering and the wire harnesses are. And I asked her if I could speak to the investigative team to explain to them that the fire did not originate from the location where they said. In fact, the fire came up through the steering column and singed my hair. And the lady declined, telling me they'd already completed their investigation. At which point then I asked, okay, well, can you send me the photographs that leads you to think that the fire was caused by organic matter on the fuel rail? Now, bearing in mind, I had explained that the ATV was cleaned prior to the winter, and that when I rode the ATV, it was on top of ice and snow. So there shouldn't really be any reason for organic matter to get into the ATV, and the ATV had actually only been running for around approximately 10 minutes at the time before bursting into flames, and she declined. But I pressed the issue, and she said she would go and speak to her team again and get back to me. And so she calls me back and says that the guy who did the investigation had apparently inspected the fuel rail, and it was very dirty with organic matter, and was able to run his finger along through the organic matter on the fuel rail. Also, an important implication is if it's a fault with the ATV, then Polaris may have liability. If, however, it's due to lack of user maintenance, then it would be the user's fault. So I got off the phone, went to the ATV and recorded it, and these were my findings.
This looks to be the fuel rail that Polaris said had organic material on. I haven't touched it. I presume the Polaris guy says he's touched it, but I haven't touched it. This is the first time I will have touched it. And I don't think there is organic material, certainly not one that survived a fire. I mean, there is burnt plastic on the fuel rail, as you would expect, but I don't see any organic material.
After this, I began to search online to see if there were other people that had a similar experience as me. However, there appeared to be more lawsuits than people actually talking about it. In one interesting forum post I did see was a user who said his ATV burnt down, it was replaced, but he couldn't talk about it anymore because he had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And of course, I'm opposed to any form of censorship or any kind of document that would limit my ability as a consumer to speak about my experience. So I thought, Polaris had offered me a credit of $8,000, but I wondered whether or not I would have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So I asked them, will I be required to sign any form of non-disclosure agreement or similar document? They replied, yes, you will need to review, accept, sign, and return a general release before any credit can be issued to the dealer of your choosing. So then I declined their offer. And one interesting thing to note is that in Maine, there's a 4-year consumer warranty period, and this ATV was under a year old. So I emailed the statute or the law to Polaris to review, explaining to them that actually the ATV was still covered under warranty as of Maine's law. And that was the point that Polaris stopped replying to my emails, and I haven't heard from them since. Only this letter to say that Mandy's ATV is at risk of catching fire.